Hello YouTube vintage stereo collectors. So I've actually been working on this TW61, diagnosing a problem with the left channel, but I'm not here to get into that except it's going a bit slow. Why am I wearing the hat? Well, I was at the opening of an outdoor flea market today. It was the first one this year, and going around, the wind was blowing, got rained on, and boy, my wife has patience. She stuck it out, and they have this little place in there with the best grilled cheese and hot dogs. Anyway, why do I have these on? Well, my eyes are kind of baggy and bloodshot. It's just kind of an odd week. Just, the stuff that comes up, Anyway, I'm not here to whine about anything. I'm here to talk about stereos and answer some questions. I'm almost thinking of doing a live streaming type of thing at some point when I have time. It's more just a matter of time because I do other things, like I do IT work and I have family stuff going, and a little bit of history. Okay, I started out in electronics at a very young age. I used to pick stuff up and fiddle with it, when I was like 10, 11 years old. Tube radios and things like that, believe it or not. Never really got shocked or hurt from them. I had a grandfather who was really into this. He worked for a company that built cabinets for Electro-Home and Canada Custom Cabinets. And so I was always around the cabinet type TVs, the console stereo system, that kind of stuff. He used to, after he retired, at age 6, I think he retired at 64 instead of 65 because he had a heart attack. He got into repairing stuff at the house, and he would pick stuff up like wherever, like dining room tables, and like just do absolutely beautiful restoration work on them. Kitchen cupboards, all kinds of stuff. So I kind of got that interest in working with my hands that way. But I also, in school, I had good marks like in math and physics, that kind of stuff. And I took both shop, electronics, auto shop, all that kind of stuff. The electronics was really cool. And my grade 12 class, so there were 3 of them. There was grade 11 one, grade 12 one, and then grade 12 project building, where I made a guitar amp like how many other guys, right? But it was a good course. And actually, that year was the last one. Because of budget cuts, they dropped the electronics class and the teacher retired. And I helped dismantle the classroom, and I actually still have some parts that were thrown in the dumpster that I took home with me from back then. Tube sockets, like brand new tube sockets, things like that. They just get rid of it. They actually paid a bunch of students to dismantle the room. Anyway, I ended up going to college for electronic engineering technologist. And I worked for 3 different stereo small stereo stores. The first one, the sheriff and bailiff came and chained the door. I'd only been there about a month. They had so many loans out, etc., etc. I just came into work one day and I was really eager. I was an eager person, They had my first job as a bench tech, and the police come in and they're like, "You have to leave. Are these your tools?" Yes. Put them in my car and drove across the street and watched. They put a chain through the door, and so then about a week later I got a job at another stereo shop as a bench tech, doing sales and car stereo installer, because car stereo was huge at that time in the early 80s. And what was really neat about that is they'd say, like, "We have a boat that's coming in, we need to make some custom cabinets, for the speakers." Well, those skills that my grandfather taught me really helped. I didn't build them as good as my grandfather, but they thought it was good. Like custom subwoofer cabinets, custom enclosures that would go into an area of the boat, and there'd be a CB radio and like a AM/FM cassette player and different stuff like that. Did a bunch of that stuff. And then that store had some personnel changes, was only there about a year, and I actually got poached. I came out one night to my car, and the manager of the store down the street was standing there. I knew who he was, and we talked a while, and he offered me considerably more money, better hours, and a better job. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to give notice. How about in 2 weeks? And he's like, yeah, okay. So I went back to see my boss. And he said, why are you talking to him? I saw you out there. And I said, he offered me a better job. He said, get out of here. You're done. I don't want you working here for 2 weeks sabotaging things. I'm like, okay. So I was like, I took a 2-week holiday and then went to work for the other place. But you know, as in the 80s, kind of the classic era of stereo shops is already starting to change considerably. And the stereo equipment was changing. And they didn't, like, I put it, each year I noticed the store wasn't doing as well. And I thought, you know, there's some writing on the wall here that this isn't going to last forever. And then I kind of like through a series of a family connection, I ended up getting hired like that for the telephone company. And it was just like, I went to an interview and this guy was like, oh, so what do you do? And I said, we're going to stereo shop. What's your education? I didn't even have a resume with me. And I told him a little bit about the college courses. I actually took college electronics. And he's like, okay, sounds good to me. We'll let you know. Oh, all right. And I thought he meant we'll let you know if we give you a job. What he was going to let me know was when do I start. So I actually got a phone call. It was a few weeks, like 5 or 6 weeks later, saying, you're starting this Monday at this office. Oh, what does that mean? What am I doing? I don't know. You'll find out when you get there. It was the way things were different back then, but so I actually hung on to my job at the stereo shop for a little bit. When I worked for the phone company, I went back there on the weekends, and I was making 3 times as much at the phone company with benefits, and I was actually going to quit the phone company and stay at the stereo shop, but then I went to their Christmas dinner thing, and the manager said, we're closing the store, just not making enough money, we're going down to 1 store. They had 2 stores, and I'm like, oh, okay, well that makes the decision for me. But I still kept going. I still, at that point, which would have been, you know, the mid-80s, 1985, I was still picking up stuff like this at garage sales and at wherever I could find flea markets and working on them and selling them just as a hobby. And it was just, I got into this thing. I had bought several pieces of brand new audio gear. And I would always sell it. I never hung on to anything long term. I went through several Yamaha integrated amps, you know, and it was a big deal purchasing each one. It was like, I'm going to keep this forever. And then it would be like 8-9 months later, I'd be at somebody's house or somewhere and I'd hear something else. I'd be like, I want that one. And so then I got into the kind of like, I'll trade you for this. And a lot of stereo shops still would do some swapping. But I just eventually stopped buying new stuff because it was now like mid through the late 80s. The classic stuff from the early 70s was starting to show up like for nothing. You know, like at a garage sale, you know, it'd be $10. I remember like Pioneer and Sansui receivers and stuff, like $10 or $15 a piece, and it'd just be like, yeah, we bought some smaller equipment. We bought an all-in-one. Like, okay, great for you. And I would take this stuff, and then there were still enough people buying that knew the vintage, that gear of that era was better because it was discreet. Okay, we've talked about this before, but I was always able to sell stuff, and I always used the money to buy something else. Okay, I'll put it to you that way. And that's kind of what I do to this day. Like, the stuff that I own, I usually sell, and it sells pretty easily once it's restored. I get people emailing me that have seen the videos or through YouTube, or that just know me and say, what do you have coming up? And I'll say, and it sells really easy. Sometimes I just use like a local like Facebook or Kijiji for some stuff, and it just like sell that way. And that's a whole different thing, of course. You get some real ding-dongs when you sell that way. Or once in a while eBay. Usually the reason I do eBay is I had somebody, okay, from Germany. And they wanted Heathcote tuna that I had done a video on. This is a little while ago. Maybe 6-7 years ago. And I said, well, I'll put it on, like I said, it'll be this much. I figured out the shipping. They gave me their address and everything. They said, well, what guarantee do we have? I said, if you want a guarantee, I will put it on eBay, but instead of 300 US, I'm going to ask 350 for it. Because I have to package it, etc., etc. eBay takes their cut. But the shipping's guaranteed, you know, and they just were like, yes, do that. So, you know, like that one worked out really good. So sometimes I do stuff like that through eBay. And then I take the cash and I'm out at a flea market or whatever and I buy something else. Some of the units belong to friends of mine, you know, that buy stuff and they're like, can you make this work better or whatever? And because there's not that much money in it. And if you ask any of the people like Skylabs, anybody like that, especially if you have real estate you have to pay for, there's not a lot of money in this stuff. There's enough. You don't do it for the money, you do it because you love audio. And I used to play electric guitar and piano. I even took violin lessons. But I was never musically inclined. But I like sound. And I like TV and video too, of course. But there's something about good old-fashioned stereo sound on a nice system. You know, just even if my hearing's not as good as it used to be, I still enjoy it. As far as some of the questions people ask me, yeah, I do sometimes take repairs in, but it can take a while, a couple months. It's just the way it goes because I still do IT work and I also do website work and photography and a number of things. So, you know, like it just keeps going. And I'm retired. The other thing I'm saying, I'm retired from telecom. I took a retirement package, then I went and worked for another company, which is another story, doing IT work for about 9 years. Ended up being like the manager of IT or whatever you want to call me, the network administrator. And I was the entire staff as well. I worked 7 days a week. It was unbelievable, the hours I had to put in to keep things going. Because they didn't want to bring in extra people. So I'm officially retired from telecom. This is really a retirement thing. I'm back to what I used to do. Back to being a bench tech, but it's a different business now. Back in the early 80s, in the early 80s was a good time to be a bench tech, so I was kind of a late comer. We had a lot of stuff from the 70s coming in. People would bring in their 1977 Pioneer receiver, you know, and XX series, whatever, and say, this is a dead channel, but this is a really good unit. These are better than the new ones. I say, yeah, actually they are. They're really good. And people were still spending the money to restore them, and at that point, the repair department was doing fairly well. So, but now it's different. What I do, like for instance on this one, I've just repaired the dead channel by putting in some new transistors in a cap. Okay, now I'm going to restore the whole thing once I have it working. And I've talked about it in other videos, so I'm not going to get into this, but it's hard. Like, here's something that was made in 1966, 67. To leave it this way with all these old caps and everything, especially this one here, which is drooling out the bottom, leaking oil, it'll play for a while, but it's not playing at its peak, and it's going to break down again. So now it's a restoration thing, and it's more time and more hours and more parts, but there's the end product is worth it. Anyway, I hope that answers some of your questions, and I'm going to put the hat on because my hair is kind of messy. Anyway, thanks for watching and listening.